What I'd like to talk about now is the actual delivery and the body language and the non-verbals of communication. And all of these things are very, very important. And as I said, they're the things that people tend to focus on most when they're watching themselves back, and they're probably the things that people are conscious of most when they're making a presentation or they're debating and so on. Before we look at it in a little bit of detail, let me just give you a little word of caution. I read an article recently by a guy called TJ Walker on Forbes.com. He's one of the contributors on the website there. And the title of the article was, "How do I know if my presentation really works?" And he was saying it's a question he very often is asked by executives. And he said there's one very simple way of testing if your presentation works. And that is very simply to do it with a test audience before you actually need to give the live presentation, and then a day or two afterwards ask them, what do you remember I told you in my presentation? And he says it's very simple. If they remember the things you wanted them to remember, you've communicated effectively. If they haven't remembered the things you wanted them to remember, you haven't effectively communicated. And he was saying that if they say things to you like, well, you know, you spoke really well, or you're really confident, or you looked really good, or you sounded great, he's saying you've actually failed to communicate effectively. Unless people can reiterate the things you have told them, you're not getting your points across as well as you could. So while delivery isn't the most important aspect of communication, it is important to get it right, because if you spent a long time preparing a debate or preparing a presentation, or indeed a long time preparing for a job interview, and you go in to that situation and you perform poorly and you deliver poorly, you'll come across as lacking in confidence, and you'll come across like you haven't done a huge amount of preparation. So when the body language doesn't work in your favour, you don't really do yourself a service. So there are a couple of things that it's important to bear in mind when it comes to body language. And the first thing that I want to talk about is eye contact. Eye contact is hugely, hugely important. The idea as a communicator is that you're going to engage with your audience, whether this is an individual or whether it's a group of people. And one of the best ways to do that is maintain good eye contact with the people that you were talking to. This is easy enough when it's a one-on-one situation, but if you're talking to a group of people, you're addressing a room of people, you simply need to do a sweep of the room, and at one point or another, each member of the audience will feel like you're making eye contact with them, and they'll feel more engaged in the conversation. When people find themselves in a situation of having to think and talk at the same time, generally what happens is they begin to look up at the ceiling or they look down at the floor. They break eye contact with the people that they are talking to, and it's a little bit disconcerting for the audience to have somebody talking to them who isn't making eye contact with them. So for example, when you're doing your oral exams in a couple of weeks' time, it's really important that you're sitting there looking at the examiner and that you're not looking down at the floor, you're not looking up at the ceiling. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go in and play a game of stares with the examiner. It's okay to break eye contact momentarily every now and then, but really you want to hold the eye contact looking in that region of a person's face as much as you possibly can. Next thing that's really important is to smile. A very simple thing, but no audience wants to feel like a presenter or a communicator is there under duress or there against their will. So smile and show people that you're happy to be there. People who are listening to you are as interested in your personality as they are in what you have to say. And show them that you're happy to be there, show them that you're glad to be there. A great way to do that, very simply, is smiling. What's a very useful thing to do when you're addressing people is to do a little bit of a self-audit on your body language and on your posture. And confident people stand or sit with a very open, almost expansive posture. So they take up the space and they fill the space that's around them. People who are nervous or people who are lacking in confidence tend to make themselves a little bit smaller so they can sit leaning forward in the chair, they can really hold themselves tightly when they're standing, and it just portrays an air of inconfidence or lacking confidence to your audience. So that's really something that you want to watch for. And in fact, there's a lot of research that's been done to suggest that our posture actually can affect how we feel about ourselves, never mind how other people perceive us. And in coaching, there is a saying called fake it until you make it. So if particularly you're feeling nervous in addressing a group of people, really pay attention to your posture and your body language, and make sure that your posture, it's open, it's expansive, that you're filling the space around you. You will feel more confident in your communication, and the audience will respond to you accordingly. Sometimes when people get nervous, their voice can get a little bit shaky. When you're communicating to people, really important, if you're trying to get your points across clearly and really convey your message, that you've got a good strong voice that is not too monotone, Good strong delivery, and really the only way to achieve that is to practice before you deliver your presentation or do your debate. Sometimes when we say things for the first time out loud, they don't come out quite the way we would like them to. They can be a little bit sloppy, a little bit messy. So the only way to make sure that your delivery is slick is to practice it beforehand, and that really is a great way of getting your voice under control. We all get nervous when we have to speak in front of a group of people, whether, as I said, it's an oral exam or a job interview or a debate. No matter how well prepared you are, you will probably be nervous. There's nothing I can say or do this evening that will eliminate the nerves entirely. You've got to recognise that this is just part of the process. It's part of the deal. You need to manage it effectively. When we find ourselves in these very formal communication situations, our bodies tend to produce adrenaline just to get us through the experience. And adrenaline has a number of physical symptoms. For example, it can cause our mouths to go very, very dry. So always have some water to hand, particularly when you're addressing a group of people, and sip water regularly. Very, very difficult to talk when your mouth is bone dry. So sip water regularly throughout your communication. Have notes. Sometimes people feel I'm expected to get up and talk to people, I'm expected to deliver this debate and not have a single note in my hand. That is not the case. If you decide that notes are a safety blanket and it's something you would like to use them openly. Don't steal sly, subtle little glances at them every now and then. Use them openly, refer to them. Don't hide the fact that you are using notes. A big worry that people have when it comes to communicating, particularly in a formal setting, is what happens if I'm so nervous I forget what I was going to say. I draw a blank, I lose my train of thought, I forget what the question was that I was asked. What do I do then? A lot of people panic, they keep on talking, and they hope that they will get back on track. The best thing to do in that situation is to stop talking. So let's say you're in the middle of your oral exam, you've been asked to talk a little bit about your family, you're halfway through the bit that you had prepared, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, I can't remember the next thing I need to say here. Stop and acknowledge the fact that you've drawn a blank. Take a couple of seconds, take the pressure off yourself, and have a think, what's the last thing I was saying, what's the next thing I need to say, and then carry on, keep on going. No examiner, no interviewer is going to mind somebody who quite openly admits that they've lost their train of thought. Similarly, if you make a mistake, acknowledge that fact. If you're ever doing a debate and someone asks you a question you don't know the answer to, it's okay to acknowledge that you don't know the answer. Much better to acknowledge that you don't know the answer than prove you don't know the answer by attempting to answer the question. So there is this statistic that 7% of our communication is really the words that we say, and everything else is the non-verbal, how we carry ourselves, the tone of our voice, and so on. Really, my take on good communication, it's a 50-50 split. It's really important that you're saying the right things, the things that are relevant to the audience, things that are structured, things that are backed up by examples, but it's also important that it's delivered in the right way, that you sound interested in what you're saying, and that it sounds interesting to the people that are listening, that it's practiced and that it's polished, that it's slick. This isn't necessarily just for a job interview. It can be, as I said, for an oral exam. It can be for a school debate. Any situation where you're trying to create understanding, try and get your points across. Now, in the notes that you can download for the talk, I go through those key principles and really the characteristics of good communicators. I hope that you can see that these principles are universal to any communication and they apply in any setting that you're going to find yourself in. All that it remains for me to say is that good luck over the next couple of weeks, months and years in all of the situations that require you to communicate effectively. I hope there's been some value in this half hour for you. I hope that really it will lead you to do better presentations, give stronger debates, do better exams and do better job interviews ultimately. If you want any more information on communication skills or communication skills training, you can check out our website. It's www.carrcommunications.ie. I'd just like to finish by thanking the guys here in Online Grinds for giving me the opportunity and you guys the opportunity to learn a little bit about what high impact communication really is.